but I want the genocide to stop. And if Democrats realize that they can't be that proximate to Trump on this issue, the only way I can get a ceasefire, the only way I can get an arms embargo, the only way I can get a divestment from this apartheid, the only way I can do that is if Democrats know that that's the only path to victory for them.
I don't know if that's a Green Party responsibility, though, specifically. I think that's what people, even people in the uncommitted movement, are fighting for. And that's something where I think they've had incredible amounts of patience. And honestly, the Harris-Walz campaign has just completely disrespected and shit all over them.
Again, not full disclosure, but just for clarity's sake, I'm a Green Party member, have been for 2 decades. And I voted for Jill Stein in 2016, just as an example. And I've been told ever since, I'm responsible for all the ills of the world. Not Trump, who actually did the stuff, not Hillary Clinton, who ran a god-awful campaign and did nothing to convince people to vote for it, just Susan Sarandon, me, Eddie Glaude, all the people who did a thing. And I find that very frustrating. And here's what I'll say. I believe that there is legit.
I agree. That's frustrating because the people who didn't vote for Hillary Clinton, who were on the left, are not the reason that Hillary Clinton lost that election. That's absolutely ridiculous. And it's one of those things where it's like people, especially like really diehard Democratic blue no matter who supporters, love to be able to point the finger at anything other than the ineptitude of their own candidates or their own like political party. Like that, very, very rarely you'll see them be like, well, you know what? I think this is actually a bad thing that the Democrats are doing. It's always just like blue no matter what, blue no matter who. We have to follow, believe, in all things. And it's like, if Hillary Clinton is losing an election, she's not losing it because of the Bernie bros. She's not losing it because of the third party voters single-handedly that were capable of siphoning enough votes away from Hillary. Hillary won the popular vote. People, Pokemon went to the polls. She lost in some key swing states. She also refused to canvass in some key swing states and just really took the Rust Belt for granted.
An argument for saying I'm not voting Green, I'm voting for Hillary or Kamala purely for strategic reasons. I get that argument, and I don't die on that hill. Just like I don't disagree with the person who says I can't vote for genocide, right? But there's an idea, and you've been one of those people who sort of said this before in some form or fashion, that it is a waste of a vote to vote Green. Particularly in these contested states, and that it doesn't ultimately help the world. I'm equally unpersuaded by that argument.
Well, I mean, in a swing state, I find it it's worse than a wasted vote. I mean, look, and I say this, I voted Ralph Nader, and in 2000. And now the Green Party promise, or the promise of the Green Party at that time, was very different than I think it is today, frankly. But I also vote swapped to the extent that you could in a nascent internet at that time, where much of it was dial up. But at that time, you actually had more local elected officials. I mean, significantly, like a third more than you have today. I think I was just reading, like, Ted Glick, who was a longtime Green Party member, left in 2017. He had cited a statistic that, like, back in 2004, it was like 225 officials. Today, it's 149. I asked the question of Jill Stein in 2016 in the run up to election through like a TYT town hall type of thing. What are you doing to build the party infrastructure? Like, that's what Nader told us. Nader told us, and I was like, I'm like, yeah, let's do this. And there was no building of that infrastructure. It just, like, he went away. He didn't follow through. That infrastructure was just not built. There was no strategy. It's not articulated. I asked Jill Stein the same question. There's no strategy.
Because I asked her that same question. Obviously, I have some answers for that too. What answer did you get, though, when you asked about the infrastructure these years later?
In 2016, what answer did I get?
Yeah. I'm just juxtaposing that to Nader in 2000.
It's important, I think she said. But there was no articulated plan, and I'm like, this is 16 years later. Like, there should be. Our plan is I'm just saying hypothetically, we're going to raise this money on a national level. We're going to use this national campaign to build the campaigns of 10 Congress people who are going to run in the next election. We have identified these districts where we have the highest propensity of progressive Democrats who might vote for a Green Party person in these districts. We're going to go in there with the money we're raising now. Every dollar that we raise 20% of that will go to these races. I'm campaigning around with these individuals because in 2 years from now, we want to win 3 House seats.
Are they debating? They're friend baiting. Yes, it's a real expression. They're just having a friendly debate amongst friends. That is honestly, a lot of people sometimes poo-poo lefties debating lefties or stuff like that, whereas I love them because I find that they are actually in good faith conversations. You're not sitting there looking to destroy your opponent. I can't wait to eviscerate Ben Shapiro in the battlefield of ideas. He will get so pwned and wrecked by my brain and high triple-digit IQ. Like, it's usually not that. Like, I've debated Ben Burgess a couple times, and it's like you're more trying to, in good faith, understand someone else's position and then also grow from it, and also see like, okay, well, it's actually kind of illuminating. I didn't know that handful of things that you just told me. I would kind of then want to reshape how I view this, stuff like that. They can be very constructive, unless it turns into straight up just like the name calling.
Like that, it's just a hypothetical.
Yeah, I mean,
nothing.
So that's been my pushback to some extent. I have said to Jill on the show and in private as well. I think that the public reads us as spoilers and grandstanders, that we come around every 4 years, we run for president and we lose. I don't think that's, I know that's not what's actually happening with the Green Party. And so I would encourage people to also recognize the extraordinary pressure that Democrats apply to us in states, so that, they're always knocking us off the ballot.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
We don't get media coverage. So it's not like there aren't Green Party members on city councils. It's not like there aren't Green Party members running.
Well, like I say, I think there's like 149 people who are in positions. But like I say, in 2004, there was almost 1/3 more. It was like something like 200.
That's not a lack of infrastructure. I think that's the consequence of being targeted systematically by corporate Democrats. I also think
that's a hard question to answer, because I would say that I agree with that kind of that criticism, where it's like, if this has been something that's been a plan in place for a very long time, in the case of Sam, you say decades, right? When he used to buy into the concept of, yes, we should build third-party power effectively in the United States to be able to break up the duopoly. He bought into that with Ralph Nader, and then he didn't see there to be an actual post every 4 years when there's a presidential debate, which obviously does get a lot more media attention and stuff like that. Outside of that, there's not a consistent kind of like drive and push for this to be a 24/7 political project. And that's one of the criticisms a lot of people have of Jill Stein specifically, is that she will completely disappear off the map, and then 4 years later can reappear if she is going to be nominated as the party leader. And in that period of time, she makes 0 social media posts, doesn't use the platform that she's built or gotten, or the voice that she has. And in this case, specifically of this election cycle, I think 2 things are true at once. What I have seen of Jill Stein, I haven't been enjoying, specifically because it seems like she is trying to market this year specifically that she is the solution to genocide. That if you vote for the Green Party, you are voting to end the genocide. And if you vote for any other party, you're voting to exacerbate the genocide. And there's no question that if you vote for either Biden and Harris, who are currently fueling and enabling the genocide, or Donald Trump, like Donald Trump has specifically said that he's not only going to, finish the job, but domestically, he's going to be worse. These headlines have been around for a long time. Trump vows to expand the travel ban to people from Gaza. He's going to stop people from Gaza and refugees arriving into the country. So that'll be the hey, you didn't think things could get worse? Well, they can always get worse kind of situation, right? Which is just horrifying. I also understand, though, completely why someone looking at that entire thing, if it was, say, a problem that you could solve by flipping a switch, and you could get a device that moves like a trolley or something, and you had to pick because your vote makes the trolley go over one, and it's going to be running over Palestinians in all situations. Your actual, if you were humane, look at that problem would be that this needs to be destroyed. this whole contraption, this entire machine that you are building here is a genocide or genocide light machine. And so this machine in and of itself is fundamentally fucked. And so we should be destroying that, and we should be working towards something else. I think the problem in selling a falsehood, which is that a vote for the Green Party is effectively a vote to end genocide, because that is just not a material reality in the world, right? By voting green, even if every single lefty and every lefty content producer and every lefty pundit, I think, like, when you look at polls, the progressive left in the United States makes up like 6% of the population. If you combine that with a handful of people you could siphon off, say, disillusioned, conservatives who want legalized weed, and then maybe some liberals who are suddenly looking for an alternative because they can't stand the genocide anymore, that kind of stuff, you're still not going to be able to effectively produce enough votes to form the governing body, right? So that's just not a reality. But all that being said, the other side of this, which is liberals consistently shitting on people who vote for the Green Party or people who vote third party, are ignoring the writing on the wall. And that is the Michigan voters who are saying that they're now pledging that they are going to vote for Jill Stein because they're looking for any alternative to, obviously, the duopoly. They're specifically, especially if they're Arab American voters, Muslim American voters, or part of the uncommitted movement, they are single issue, we cannot support genocide in any way, shape, or form voters. And those same voters are not suddenly overnight, if Jill Stein announced that she's dropping out, going to move to Democratic Party. They're going to move to another third party or another group that they find is an alternative to the two parties that are both saying that they're going to support Israel. So it's not as if she's literally spoiling the candidates. Like, the way to capture those votes and to secure Michigan is for, again, Kamala Harris to take a very strong stance on this issue, one in which she doesn't even have to say something inflammatory like abolish Israel or anything like that. She can very clearly say that she is intending to adhere to international rules-based order, and that alone can be enough of a, you know, I'm signaling that I am in fact going to withhold weapon shipments. I can't say it out loud because if I do that, apparently it's political suicide. I don't know, but they're not going to do that. They've made a calculated assessment that if they can just wait, they're so close to the finish line right now, right? We're talking about less than 40 days or around the 40-day mark. You're so close. If I could just get past that finish line, I don't have to keep on regurgitating the same politically safe point, which is that October 7th was horrifying. It was a terrible attack. There was mass rapes. Everyone should be very, very aware of how bad it was. And also the suffering of Palestinians has to end, which is why I've repeatedly asked and called for a ceasefire. That's her line, and she repeats it over and over and over again, and it sounds really nice when she humanizes Palestinians a little bit, but that's just because everyone is so desperate for anything at this point, just crumbs in the mix of it all.
The strategy that has been articulated, and we may agree or disagree with it, and I happen to disagree with it largely, but there is a clear strategy of saying, hey, this presidential state's getting 5% of the presidential vote is so important because then we get $10 million, which, you know, for Democrats is a drop in the bucket. They spend that on haircuts. But for the Green Party, that is capacity building to invest in multiple.
Which, and again, like I have no real issue with voting for the Green Party in non-swing states. I mean, that was, you know, like that's the vagaries of our system are such that, you know, during like in 2020, I felt like even in blue states, there's value in voting for Biden because Donald Trump, like having the popular vote go for Biden was going to be important. I suspected that like Trump was going to make some type of issue about the election. It turns out he did.
Sure.
And I think that like, you know, having the popular vote, it's only meaningful in a sort of like a narrative sense, right? Like, right. And I think there's an argument for that, but
so you have a mandate. Yeah.
Yeah. But if there's a legitimate sort of like infrastructure building to be done by the Green Party in non-swing states, and that, party members can assess whether there's a legitimate, like, plan that's actually going to be implemented.
But I'm pushing back on the non-swing state part. I'm saying, because basically that argument is you can vote Green as long as it doesn't hurt Democrats.
Well, you can vote Green as long as it doesn't empower Donald Trump.
So here's a different perspective.
Mark's right in the way that was raised.
But let's just use Gaza as one example. If we say, and again, I begin from the premise that Donald Trump will be worse on Gaza. I reject the argument, even the one that Butch Ware made last night on behalf of himself and Jill, that there's no way to know that because that's a hypothetical counterfactual, right? Like we don't know what Trump would have done. It's like, yeah, we do, right?
Right.
Based on history, not based on my guesses, based on and based on his full, what he literally said was, he said they should have done more.
Yeah. And I would also argue it's based upon who is going to elect him. And right. Who is not going to elect him? Like the constituencies, right. Like politicians are not one-to-one receptive to their thing, but like there's nobody who's going to vote for Donald Trump who gives a shit about a single life of right. Anybody in Gaza or Palestine.
But I can still look at Biden Harris and say they have been despicable,
horrible
on this issue, right? It's a moral atrocity what's happening
yep.
in Gaza, and there's absolutely it's entirely indefensible.
Yep.
And so if I'm a voter who's focused on that issue enough for that to be my determining factor, just for the sake of this example, I don't think it's unreasonable for a Green Party person to say, or anybody to say, yes, things will be a little bit worse under Trump on this issue, but I want the genocide to stop. And if Democrats realize that they can't be that proximate to Trump on this issue, the only way I can get a ceasefire, the only way I can get an arms embargo, the only way I can get a divestment from this apartheid, the only way I can do that is if Democrats know that that's the only path to victory for them.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know if that's a Green Party responsibility, though. Specifically, I think that's what people, even people in the uncommitted movement, are fighting for, and that's something where I think they've had incredible amounts of patience, and honestly, the Harris-Walz campaign has just completely disrespected and shit all over them. They've given them like the smallest crumbs at the table, crumbs that they were entitled to, by the way. If you look at the DNC, like the people who arrived at the DNC from the uncommitted movement, those were elected delegates who had the right to be there, just like anyone else, but they were repeatedly denied access to being able to speak, even if it was a pre-approved speech, even if it was a speech that directly endorsed Kamala and Waltz. Like this was going to be a speech that, like, when you read the speech, it's very clearly an attack on Trump. It says that Trump uses Palestinian as a derogatory slur. Donald Trump has already stated multiple times that he's going to do a ban for all Gazan refugees trying to arrive into the United States when he reenacts his Muslim ban, as he had already previously done. It was a very, very distinctly, I'm here to support the Harris campaign, but the Harris campaign has definitely made that calculation that they find it's going to be far too damaging to them to directly associate with anything that is critical of Israel or the Israeli government at this moment in time. And I, unfortunately, just because of the cynicism and maybe it's not being an American, I don't buy into the progressive, I guess, wish casting that she's just right now holding her cards close to the chest until the day after inauguration, where she's going to just become all of a sudden this voice for the Palestinian people and resistance. I don't understand in what world is suddenly that just brewing and waiting. And if you just wait for it, that's going to happen. I think that you do need to continue to show nonstop, complete outrage and anger towards elected officials and people who want to be elected officials about what is taking place on your dime. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, and I think people who are protesting, they're not protesting to get Trump into power. They're not protesting because they're trying to be spoilers. They're protesting because they're fucking sick of seeing dead babies every day. That's why. And it's like it's driving everyone fucking mad just to have to sit there, because you feel so fucking hopeless to have to witness this stuff from the privilege, by the way. I will add the privilege of your computer screen and your cell phone, and you sit there and you're like, holy shit, that's so fucked up. I never thought I would see the inside of a child's skull, but I've just seen it 6 times today, every single fucking morning. And oh, wait, these aren't even Palestinian kids anymore. Now it's Lebanese kids, because yeah, now they're just indiscriminately bombing Lebanon as well. This is really bad. Let's not get pulled into this. Why in the world is the West continuously supporting a regime that seems to be really, really far-right, authoritarian, and bent on provoking multiple full-scale wars? This is very dangerous, and at the precipice of that, there's absolutely no reason to be directly associated with, again, a far-right regime that is doing genocide in Gaza, that is ethnically cleansing, that is now clearly targeting the West Bank. They are doing their same fascistic policies of removing any potential press that might be critical of them. All this kind of stuff, deeply, deeply dangerous. And Biden and his administration has shown itself to be completely in sync with it, like not even critical of it. Not my red line is this, and if you cross it, I'm sorry, you can't have my support. You crossed it. Here's more support, and here's more bombs. Keep doing what you're doing. We have to preserve the only democracy in the Middle East, which is a very ironic thing to say of an apartheid state. But either way, like that seems to be this black hole that we all have to spiral down. It is very hopeful if the Harris-Walz campaign is going to do away with the worst of the worst ghouls, Anthony Blinken, John Kirby. If these people have no way to be anywhere near her inner circle, that's good. If she's going to be appointing someone, as a lot of the insider information and the reports that I've read, Politico and others, have said that she's going to be appointing someone who actually has been very, very open to the plight of Palestinians, and someone who has actually been speaking out against, the occupation, and thinking that we should, again, go back to the determined lines from the 1967 UN resolution to be able to grant both the entirety of the Gaza Strip and the entirety of the West Bank to be 100% autonomous, independent, sovereign states of Palestine governed by a Palestinian democratically elected government. If that is something that is on the horizon, that's hope. But again, those are just little crumbs, and there's been nothing given to the uncommitted movement to justify them suddenly deciding that they're going to support the Democratic ticket. And again, they're taking that risk. The DNC, the Democratic establishment, has definitely sat down, looked at the swing states, been like, yeah, it's risky. Michigan, we could have a potential 150,000 to 200,000 registered voters come out in numbers in a state that we only won by a couple 10,000, over Donald Trump when it was Joe Biden. And that was in large part a rejection of Donald Trump's racist Muslim banning policies that Arab Americans and Muslim Americans rejected, and came out in force to canvass, to knock on doors, to support the Democrats. It's going to be a calculated risk to lose all of those potential voters. Some of them will. We're gonna hope that some of them, just by default and fear of the Trump presidency, will do that. But ultimately, we're gonna roll the dice on that one.
I would argue that there is no way for that voter you've talked about to get those things that they want.
Ever, or just in this election cycle?
Certainly in this election cycle. And
Agreed.
And if the material outcome you want is less suffering of the Palestinian people, then you got to go and do what you can to make that happen. And in this instance, it is to diminish the suffering.
Here's one more thing. And people have been saying this in the chat. You're 100% right. When it comes to actually affecting incredibly powerful entities, whether that be corporate entities, capitalist entities, and even state entities, at a level that will effectively change either policy towards Israel or globally, this is not simply going to happen at the ballot box. There's not going to be like you show up, I cross this one, I pick it, I submit it, I go home, and then the next morning you wake up and the genocide in Gaza is over. Just like a miracle, which sounds beautiful and amazing. And trust me, if that was the case, oh boy, I would be spending every single morning calling and canvassing and getting everybody to please check that fucking box to make this horrifying atrocity stop. What will have a lot more power is something that's already ongoing and something you can participate in any single day, which is boycotting and divesting and sanctioning Israel. Doing that through your own consumer habits, which you can do very easily by going to like a BDS website or something like that. But one of the things that did put a lot of international pressure on South Africa when they were an apartheid state was effectively the entire international community condemning them and pulling out, whether that be from investment and investors, of which there has been a monstrous exodus from Israel since October 7th. There has been a huge amount of draining of VC money. There's been apparently tens of thousands of startups that had to then close down. There has been a lot of people internationally, whether they be banks, organizations, and stuff like that, starting to pull money out of what is now being properly identified as a genocidal regime. That's why it's important to democratize terms like genocide, to democratize speaking about it in those terms, because that in turn will apply more pressure to, are you an investment bank? How much money do you have invested within a genocidal apartheid regime? How much money do you profit from that? Are you a mutual fund? Are you someone at home who's trying to invest in these kind of things? How much money do you profit from that? Will that prevent more people from doing startups and doing stuff like that? Tourism has plummeted. And yeah, makes sense. I mean, I'm sure a large part of that is people who are effectively trying to say that they're worried about the conflict, even though it's very, very safe in Israel. I mean, their TikToks have but to show us every single day how amazing life is there. It's so sexy. It's so fun. There's psytrance 24/7, and everyone's in bikinis, and everyone's partying, and it's just the greatest fucking scene. All that shit. But yeah, that is something that also effectively does a lot of work in applying international pressure. You have seen a decided shift, especially in the way that, both the UN's voting on this, the way international, even the West, a lot of countries that may have been very silent on these issues, like Spain, for example, or Belgium, are now speaking out very, very powerfully and using very strong language towards Israel and what they're enacting in their atrocities and their war crimes and stuff like that. A lot of this is stuff that, like, it's a 24/7 thing is what I'm trying to say. I know once you get, like, especially the American election, the biggest of all the elections, the sexiest of all the elections, it's the one that consumes the entire planet. Every other country, especially Western nations, are all watching who's going to win between the one and the two, and what it comes down to. but that's not going to ever solve like all of life's, even though it's marketed that way, that's not going to solve all of life's problems. It's something that you should participate in. If you don't participate in democracy, then the people who do are going to shape the government in their light, and it's going to be very horrifying. You know who does vote? MAGA people, old people, conservatives, right-wingers, Christians, Christian nationalists, all of them. They get out to vote. They get up, they wake up, they get into the buses, and they head down, and they go to the polls. And they can, yes, even though sometimes you might not have the majority, they can win through the electoral college system. And that can, again, dramatically affect how your life is going to be in a myriad of ways, but it's not going to ever overnight solve all the problems. That's a consistent thing. That's why like people don't think it's as fun or sexy to take all these amazing victories we're having all the time in unionization, in just the way that the discussion around unions and worker power and forming unions and having collective bargaining power, all of that those are victories in the same fight. It may not feel connected. It may feel completely disconnected from that big American election coming up, right? But it's that on all levels that have to be consistently happening for there again to be a change. There was like hold on, I wonder if I have the video of I do. Gil Scott Heron. If you've never been turned on to some of his thinking, he's the one who coined the term "the revolution will not be televised," but he explains why the revolution will not be televised. Because when you're watching the revolution on television, what you're seeing is not the first stage of the revolution.
You will not be able to plug in, turn on, and cop out. You will not be able to lose yourself on Skag and skip out for beer during commercials because the revolution will not be televised. You see, a lot of times people see battles and skirmishes on TV and they say, aha, the revolution is being televised. Nah, the results of the revolution are being televised. The first revolution is when you change your mind about how you look at things and see that there might be another way to look at it that you have not been shown. What you see later on is the results of that, but the revolution, that change that takes place, will not be televised.
That one little line, like, honestly had a profound effect upon me because it is entirely true, and you don't even think about it, but it is an active thing that can be happening at any moment in time at your computer desk or near your phone or when you're reading a book or something. But if you have a profound moment of actualization or even a revelation or something to that effect, that in and of itself is a revolution. It's not, you're not the vanguard picking up a gun to go join the comrades on the street or anything like that, but that entire idea where a seed can be planted inside of your brain that suddenly starts to grow and you start to see the world in a completely different way, and that starts to make you recognize how so many of the very things that you've been lied to your entire life on, how this entire thing is set up to uphold democracy, the American way, American values, spreading all this kind of stuff. If you start actually learning more and more about the history of how we got to where we are today, suddenly you recognize it for what it is, and why there is so much interest, especially amongst capital, to keep selling you the same lie over and over again.
What if you knew Democrats would get their butts handed to them for not being principled on this issue, but you knew also, and Trump becomes president, but you knew 4 years from now they'd have to make a different choice? Are you willing? If you knew the outcome was better, would you make that choice?
Here's the thing. Let's back up and talk about 2016. The people I would have this argument with in 2016 were like, we need to teach the Democrats a lesson. Okay. And presumably that lesson is you're not going to win without us voting for you. And you're not going to get these votes unless you do X, Y, Z. Now, the one thing is like, now look, I know like mathematically you could put Jill Stein's votes up in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan and say if they all voted for Hillary Clinton.
That's not fair, of course.
That's not fair because we can't say how many of those people would have come out and vote anyways and whatnot. And there's about
Trump as their second choice.
There's 20 exactly, and there's about 20 other reasons why Hillary Clinton lost, and at least a third of those are directly she's responsible for. Some she's not, whatever. But if I'm the Green Party, I should be out there going like, we did it. We told you. We're going to make you pay a price. You paid a price. And it's weird to me that the Green Party then turns around and says, we didn't do this. She did it, which completely ruins their leverage. But aside from that, like, again, I'm not a Green Party member. That seems like a weird strategy to me. It's like, if you want something to happen and it happens, take responsibility for it, because the whole theory is we're teaching you a lesson. You're going to have to come to us next time. And if you don't take credit for doing that, where's the point of that? But put that aside for a moment. That's just a strategic and a tactic. But the the fact is that like it is less expensive, not just in dollars, but in terms of like everything, for the Democratic Party to try and fight the inclusion on the ballot of the Green Party than to shift their policy around in a way that would necessarily support those people. I mean, look, there are times where the Green Party is funded by Republicans, right? And that's the nature of politics. Like people are going to do that. Democrats sometimes will like put an ad like this person's so conservative, they're too conservative for Pennsylvania, as a way of, helping that person be the nominee. Like that's the nature of politics. But I think like the idea that you're going to teach the Democrats a lesson, it doesn't work. It didn't work after Bush. It didn't work it didn't work in 2000. It didn't work in 2016. Like it was completely predictable that after 4 years of Donald Trump, we're going to get the most conservative Democrat in the field. Like it was completely predictable. Now he turned out to be better in a lot of stuff than I think probably you or I thought that Biden would be, but it was completely predictable. It was completely predictable that you're going to go with
that narrative. I don't see that framing. I mean, one, I think the teaching of a lesson, and I don't necessarily think that that's how the Green Party thinks about it. I think it's much more effective to say, hey, we're building a movement, we're building a party, and we're fighting for these issues, right? And we no longer have to concede our votes to people who don't respect our view or don't respect our interests and aren't fighting for us, right? But I think when you get from 2016 to 2020, yeah, you get Joe Biden, but you also get Bernie. You also get Elizabeth Warren. I think that the field in general was more to the left, and I think it was the Democratic Party putting a thumb on the scale.
But wait a second. But you got Bernie there. He ran in the primary. Like I am fully on board with primarying every Democrat at every cycle from the left at any time.
No, that's not what I mean. But I guess what I'm saying is, I think if Democrats don't put their thumb on the scale, the result, the loss of 2016 turns into a Bernie nomination. I
disagree with that. I think if Bernie had entered into that campaign either 6 months earlier or even entered in when he did, believing he had a chance to win and building an apparatus, he would have won. But I know for a fact that he didn't think he had a chance to win until like January of 2016. And he's calling around to try and get people to, like, we got to do this seriously. And people going like, it's too late, dude. Like he came in too late in that instance. Now there's no doubt in 2020, there was, Obama stepped in and sort of orchestrated. He did politics, right? Like, I mean, of course, these forces are going to be arrayed. And I should say this, like I was out there canvassing for Sanders. I was desperate to have him.
Oh, what the fuck? My numbers just dropped by like 500 people. Why are you all leaving? Come back to me, pretties. Chico is here. He's just around the corner, I say.
Be the candidate. But there are also things that even in that run that Bernie could have.
Gasp, Lance's trans. No, I'm painfully cis. I am not an egg. I'm a sissy. I'm as sissy as I get.
Done differently that would have helped, no doubt. But they also influenced Biden. Both him and Warren. We have antitrust and labor policies in this administration as a function of their primary run, and the idea that Biden knew he had to deliver that part of the constituency.
But this is an argument for the Green Party doing what they did.
Because the Green Party's not saying we're gonna like. These are constituencies within the Democratic coalition. The Green Party is specifically outside of the Democratic coalition.
Yeah, but the people who voted Green in 2016, many of them were on board with Bernie. Many of them were on board, sadly, with Warren. Many of them were. What I'm saying is, the Democratic Party certainly saw those votes drift away in 2016, and they started moving to the left.
Well, I don't think like the Democratic Party, made a decision to get for those votes. I think there were players within the Democratic Party who saw that. I think the totality, but the Democratic Party, barely exists except for as a way for us to describe a coalition of people, right? No, like, I don't think that there are more powerful people within certain sort of like circumstances within the Democratic Party, but I don't think there's a the type of machinations that you're talking about. I don't think there is a set group of people pulling these levers on every question. No, I think we can.
Not on every question, no. But I mean, it's very clear that the Obamas and the Schumers and the Pelosi's of the world very clearly orchestrated a Biden exit and a Kamala ascension.
Without a doubt. Well, yeah. I don't know if I don't think they did a Kamala ascension.
Well, not the Biden exit, which led to the Kamala ascension. They did not want Kamala.
They did not want Kamala. And so, their level of control is, iffy. And also, like, look, again, I think if you don't have what's going on in Gaza, there would have been, I know myself, I would, there was a lot of policies about Biden that I liked. And if he had, if he had said to Netanyahu, in mid-November, okay, you're done. And if you do anything more, you're going to lose this, and then if you haven't done it within 2 weeks, you're going to lose this, and this. And if it's not over by whatever December 3, then you no longer have an Iron Dome.
Right.
Like if he had said that, I certainly know that I don't have that many people watch me, but I certainly know where I would have been on getting Biden out. I would say I want to see him, debate again. That would have been a mistake. It may have been a mistake, but in terms of support, and so I think they have the ability, a Pelosi and an Obama and Schumer, and it's going to change right at one point as to who those leaders are, and they're going to be to the left, I think, in some extent, to all three of those in 10 years. Just because the center of the Democratic Party has moved to the left. But I think the way that happens is within the context of primaries. I'm not against, in principle, a third party, but I believe it has to start that it's wasted on presidential elections. I mean, half of what the Green Party does is simply sort of fight Democrats. And I don't think it's not working. Fight Democrats in a national election. I think that you go in and
I share your take on that. It's not half of what they do. I think that's what the media focuses on, because again, it allows the Green Party to look marginal and crazy. And
from the perspective of people who if it's one thing if the Green Party just thinks that they can mobilize all these people who don't vote. I mean, I think okay, I think there's a lot of evidence that you can't mobilize as many of those people as you think. But Jill Stein said back in 2016, we're seeing lesser and lesser people vote. 2018 was record number of Democrats came out and voted in an off-year election.
Trump.
Huh?
I guess that's what I'm saying. The election of Trump created a kind of groundswell of desire for resistance. And I'm saying that I think there's an argument to make that the Green Party could do better organizing and ground game, but the strategy itself of running as a third party, and even you just said Bernie sort of shot himself in the foot and could have won. So the Green Party set the stage for Bernie to win. He just dropped the ball. But if Bernie wins that race,
well, I don't think no. I think the opposite. I think Bernie had a real chance in 2016. I think he was hindered in 2020 on some level by the idea that people thinking he can't beat Trump.
See, I think in both cases, what the people wanted and what the party.
Historically, I don't know if everyone remembers too that I think he had just suffered a stroke prior, which was it was a big point of contention, and a lot of media was covering that as in oh, we don't know if he's going to be able to have the mental competency to defeat Donald Trump, and this is not looking so great. And
powerful one, we're very different.
I agree.
Yeah.
I think Bernie could win, but frankly, I also think in 2016, what's his face, Martin O'Malley could have won.
That's interesting.
I think anybody could have won. I think Hillary Clinton was uniquely sort of situated to lose to specifically Donald Trump. I think she could beat Jeb Bush. But I don't think she could beat Donald Trump. But
I'll give you the last word here. So then, what does if the idea here is that Green Party members, or whatever party, but we're just talking Green, if we don't contest in swing states, if we accept that we can't win this race, then how do we avoid the tyranny of corporate Democrats forever?
Well, I think, listen, 3 or 4 Green Party congresspeople could really make a difference in the House, right? We're at razor thin margins. A Green Party senator, one who is not realizes that they're not going to have the prime, congressional committees. It's not possible. There's a limited amount of things you can do if you're not, working with a party apparatus. But you could, on key votes, swing things in such a way that I think could exercise outsized power based upon your, your constituencies. And I think, certainly in the context of the Supreme Court, and that's the way that you build, also the way that you build more voters. It's not just a question of I don't like the the idea of a duopoly. I don't like the idea. I mean, it's the thing that the Green Party cannot and has not been able to successfully, in my estimation, project is that we can actually materially change things. We have a plan to do it. If you can't materially change things, or show a plan to do that, and 20 years later, you have less elected officials, it doesn't resonate in my mind. I mean, and from a material standpoint, if you want to materially make, save more Palestinians. And that's not, we're not, our politics are just such that we're not at a place where it's like, we're going to be able to push Israel at this juncture right now, the way that we push South Africa. Then you have to, in my mind, vote in that way. Like voting's not an expression. In my mind, voting is not an expression of what you believe. Voting is an expression of what you want to happen. And you have two potential outcomes that you're facing at. One is represented by Donald Trump winning, and one is represented by Kamala Harris winning. And you and I both agree that if Kamala Harris wins, there's going to be less Palestinian suffering. Maybe not the eradication, or probably not the eradication of Palestinian suffering, but there's going to be less. And for me, I use my vote for that outcome.
Fair enough.
Yeah, that was really constructive, just like I thought it would be. That's, again, people oftentimes are like, oh my God, I can't believe so-and-so is going to be debating so-and-so. I love them both. My two daddies are fighting. This is the worst. And I was like, oh no, I'm really excited to watch it. I think it's going to be really constructive. I might not agree with all the points on either side because I'm an enlightened centrist. I only find the juicy core truth where I can ground my axioms in the center of the Tootsie Roll. But, it is an important conversation to be had. I think, people on both ends feel sometimes frustrated that they're not being seen, especially when it's like vote shaming doesn't work. All right, so we understand that vote shaming doesn't work. We're getting vote shaming from both directions. Liberals are saying that anyone who votes for the Green Party, they're spoilers. And the Green Party is saying that anyone who votes for Harris Waltz are genocide enablers and disgusting, deplorable people. And both of those sides are yelling that at each other. Well, at the same time, the people who are voting for Jill Stein in swing states are voting, a lot of them are part of the uncommitted movements who are looking to vote for anyone effectively who's going to be representing their core issue, which is that they don't want to see either people that are family members or people who, they just don't want to see this genocide continue. That is a core issue for them. They're going to be voting for a third party unless Kamala Harris changes her policies on this, or at least vocalizes that she's going to be changing her policies, which she hasn't. She's just been doing the consistent, I believe in Israel has a right to defend itself. I believe October 7th was a horrifying event. I'm now going to talk about all the mass rapes that happened. And then I also want to talk about how the suffering of Palestinians has to end. She's just repeating the same canned answer over and over.
Hey, if you'd like to unlock secret bonus episodes as well as uncensored content, go to patreon.com/The Serfs. This show is produced by Anna Loves Riley, Arian McCarthy, Cheryl Alvarez, Comrade Junkie, Doug Caddy, Everything Important, Hagbard Celine, Jimmy Sombrero, Multimondi, Omni, Political Puppy, Preston Kroll, Quiet 185, Riley and Anna, Roller Dragon, Cernicus, Stellar Gwyn, Sebastian Demmel, Travis McClinton, Trincel, Words Greenwood, with additional support coming from all of these amazing human beings right here.